Okay, we're diving right in because if you've listened before, you know that we just start the call before we press record, which is bad manners on our part. But we're talking about the fact that I'm still, after 10 years of working from home, sitting on an office chair. I mean, a kitchen chair. At one point, I had a desk chair and then it was garbage. So it went to the curb. And I've had the chair that I want in my cart for probably 2 months now. And we were just talking about how this chair is the TikTok chair. And it's just funny because the minute something goes viral on TikTok, it becomes the TikTok chair. When this chair existed and has no affiliation with
the viral TikTok chair.
Like literally, I typed in the viral TikTok.
I just have a question for you, which is why haven't you just gotten it?
I don't know. I was thinking about this today and how I'm a big talker. When we had some exciting news, I was like, I think I'm going to buy myself this purse that I've been thinking about for 3 years. And I think I never bought it, obviously. I think the real core concept here is that I changed my mind. And so I really need to be cemented into it. But the thing is, nothing is made like it used to be. Sound like I'm 90.
Yeah.
Make things the same anymore.
Grandma.
This chair is going to last me 2-3 years. And also if I move, I can get a new chair or I could sell it. It's $150. It's not a money
Oh my
thing.
Gosh. I'm glad I'm not in your brain.
Yeah, we need less talk, more talk chair.
Oh, hi, Lennon.
Were you here this whole time?
Were you here?
That's enough about me. Hi.
Yeah, that's enough chair talk.
Enough chair talk. But the reason I want this chair is because
there's never enough chair talk, gals. Let's just be real.
I mean, I believe you're sitting at a drum setup. So are you even in a chair?
I have one behind me. Okay. I'm not sitting at it, but it is behind me, yes.
It's not one of those situations where when you're sitting this way, you're at the computer and then you just 180 and you're at the drums?
No, but I used to have that in our old house. I had a tiny little office. So there's a curtain here and there's a whole other section of downstairs in our house. And it feels a bit like a luxury now because the old days used to be that where I would do a lot of home recording and I'd just flip around from my computer and just try to play something and then turn around real quick. It was terribly uncomfortable.
You have to do a wardrobe change. You're okay, this is me in computer land, and then turn around and this is me as a musician. I love it. Anyway.
I'm excited that you're a musician and a drummer and a producer because my husband and I have a band and we're both musicians and my husband taught drums for a really long time. He's a drummer. Oh. So yeah, he's been producing our songs. We're working on an album. So I'm just excited to talk about that stuff with you too, because that plays a lot into your story.
Yeah, I love that. And so you're making a record, and how long have you guys been doing things together?
Well, we'd done things separately for a really long time, and I was actually we're so in sync on everything, and I feel totally comfortable sharing everything with him. But
the band In Sync then.
It's actually called Pact because we have a marriage pact, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really afraid to share that part of things with him. But we've been working together on that capacity for a year and a half. And yeah, so we've released a single. We have another one coming out. And yeah, it's just been really fun. And we're both on learning production journey, him a lot more than I am. But yeah.
This is really interesting because you said you were nervous to share that yourself with him, which is funny because you are when someone is oh, you sing, go ahead and sing right now. Most people are no, would never. That's a lot of pressure. If someone was draw a dog, I'd be no, I'm a professional artist. I'm not going to draw you a dog. No, not in an elitist way, but the pressure is on. I cannot do it. But it's funny that you can do that, but then you had a hard time. And I think that's going to be a theme throughout this conversation today.
Well,
I'm curious about it because I'm curious about where my thoughts go because they disappear.
We're very familiar with that. Yeah, I do it all the time.
I was going to say that you all have the best theme song of a podcast that I've ever had. And so that was or ever heard. So I was
oh my gosh,
where does this come from? And so this makes more sense now that Katie's got the thing going here.
That's so funny. Yeah, I honestly really hate that whenever you tell people you're a musician or you're a singer specifically, they go, "Oh, sing something. Oh, sing for me." That is super annoying. But I never do it. You're right, Ilana. I do respond, but it's always in a jokey way because I'm "Oh, really?" But yeah, it was so much more intimate to share with Jared. I'm not afraid to sing in front of Jared or sing in front of anybody, but to let him into the creative process and figure out how we worked together in that way,
I
like
get
beyond
that.
our relationship. That was like definitely interesting. And we had some not butting heads in the beginning, but just
Yeah.
like conflict of figuring out how to transition to that kind of a relationship, that creative collaboration. So that's definitely, it was a very interesting process.
I have tried to collaborate with my husband. We're good at one thing only.
Ew.
That is
I was
that's
like,
not
okay,
where I was
I'm
going.
gonna just let this one go.
No, we're good at like being a partner in that sense, not the sex of the time. I mean, we're good at that too, but I meant being partners, but like we would not work well together because our careers are like in totally opposite directions. And I just, even when we talk to each other about our jobs, it usually goes over the other person's head. And we were like, cool. And we like respect each other. But I think that collaborating, usually Greg is like, I just want to work on my own. And I'm like, I just want to talk to you the whole time. So we haven't had to do that. And I imagine it would be a very interesting transition from the relationship that you already have.
Yeah. Well, on this thread, it all started because Lennon, you're a producer and a musician. And I know with your story, you kind of started doing things for free and you transitioned into taking a more professional frame of yourself in the environment. So how can you kind of walk us through how you got from free to where you are now? I think that's a very interesting story.
I think I just watched Brene Brown for like 8 months straight, and then it was all fine.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it should be said, and maybe someone listening kind of feels this too, that I had to let go of my identity as a musician and a producer because I feel like I have so many things that I really love to do. And that identity sort of like hindered me from exploring other things without feeling like somebody was going to say, but wait, you do this thing. Like, why are you doing that? And that was a big part of the journey of like stepping into feeling more of a professional. So yeah, the background is that I started playing drums in church, and I'll kind of like walk through the fast lane of it when I was young.
Give it
'cause
to
was the only
us.
place- It was the only place they'd let me play and be terrible. So it
They're
was
like, the Lord
great-
won't mind.
That's right. And now it's so funny because I play at a church now, and they would never let that happen. And so it's so funny because it's just like now like really high level players, and it's like a different thing. And I think about it all the time. I'm just like, wow, what a cool opportunity though that I had a chance to just go and like play some basic things for people, and it worked. And that led to me just kind of falling in love with that instrument. And I liked it always because I got to be kind of service to the song versus being like the lead. I just always was that kind of person. And so I joined a band a lot of years later, and we toured for 10 years professionally, played Lollapalooza and Austin City Limits and Sundance Film Festival, and got to do like Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations and beyond like other random stuff. So it was just
reservations.
I know. Did you guys see Roadrunner, by the way? Did you guys watch the Bourdain documentary?
I did. It broke my heart.
It's so sad. I was in the
I love
theater.
Anthony
I like
Bourdain.
cried by myself in the theater. It was just a crazy,
Yeah.
crazy thing. Great movie, worth watching. But
So did you get to meet him, or was it just like in the background? Oh, you got to meet
Yeah.
him?
we spent like a whole day with him because we shot a
That's
whole
so
bunch
cool.
of stuff, and super cool. Like, I don't know, one of those guys where you're just like, oh yeah, he's exactly what you see. You know, just
I love
very
that.
stoic, very genuine, thoughtful. You know, it was really, really cool.
Miss that guy.
Yeah, what a talent. So that was like, we just got to do a bunch of cool stuff, but there came a point where I felt like, what am I serving here besides my ego? You know, it just all felt self-service, and I was becoming somebody personally that I didn't really care for, being a social alcoholic, like doing a lot of things where I just didn't feel like I could have just ruined my marriage and done all the, you know, just like a lot of things where that lifestyle of just being on the road 150 plus days a year, you almost have to live two separate lives, because when you come home and your significant other is like, hey, things can't be normal for you because you've been gone for 2 months and I've had to learn to live without you here. Like, how do you expect me to just make this all what you want it to be? We're figuring this out. And that kind of led me into, okay, I think I want to get out of this. And so left that, started doing production work. And then that took in like a recording studio, and then did that And then at the same time landed a commercial with this gal by the name of K-Flay, who's like a hip hop kind of pop artist. She went on to be a Grammy nominee. And then the time that we worked together, we wrote this song, and that got a commercial in Germany that made me like $40,000.
Cool.
And I felt like that was time. Like God was giving me time. Like, here, go, not money. Like, what are you going to do next? So I took that and started taking stuff around YouTube because I wanted to make business videos for musicians, and then worked with a guy, ended up being a strategist on his team. Turns out he helped YouTube write the curriculum on their own platform. And so on that team, I helped people grow their audiences by millions and billions of views, and just found that I like have a different knack for like leadership and community building and things like that I had never been able to like experience or put myself into. That just kept me wanting to come back and be like, how do I marry these ideas of being on the road for so long and what it is to like be a working class like artist, but also marry that with like the new times, which is social media and growth and what it is to build community in a digital space, and take that back to real life. So started a company called Stop the Starving Artist, and now work with all kinds of artists. And there's a whole sub stories to that. But, you know, we have visual artists, musicians, all kinds of things, like helping them build their personal brand so they can take their money making online.
I have questions as someone who
I don't think so.
not...
I'm pretty much done here, but I appreciate it.
Fun fact, I don't know if Katie knows this about me, but in elementary school, I played the drums. Yeah, I did. I didn't even get to the set.
A percussionist. You were a percussionist.
I was a percussionist. I played the xylophone really well. Anyway, but beyond that, I don't have any musical talents. I was a DJ at our local radio station. So I can like hear music, you know, got that going for me.
I've got 2 ears so far.
I like to think I could curate, but I'm going to ask a couple questions as someone who is not a musical talent to the world, because I want to clarify something. Production work. In the design world, production work, I think, in my opinion, in order to be a great designer, you have to have production skills. I don't know if that's the same for music. Like, did you already know how to do production? Or is that something you had to learn? Because I think like you could have a great voice, but you don't know anything about the tech side. Is that right? Did you teach yourself all of that?
Yeah. So when I was getting into that, when we were making records as a group, or I was working with other people, I was constantly around producers, and I found a few that I really loved, like the way they worked. And I was constantly like, you know, when they were being the drummer, a lot of times we would do my tracks in the first few days or the first couple days, whatever, then it would be all the other things. And so I had the luxury of like, when I wasn't in the room with everybody after I had already done my work, I get to just watch. So I got to have a lot of like questions and hands-on experience of like, how did you do that? Like, what made you make that decision? So I could ask like rapid fire questions in that zone. And then I kind of apprenticed under a guy named Joel, and he helped me a lot with the more gear side of production and how to use the analog side of things and how to make sure that stuff is routed well and all that kind of stuff. So I had sort of the sonic textural kind of side of production with hands-on experience, and then the gear side of production with like getting to work kind of underneath somebody.
Okay, that makes sense. And how cool that you got that experience to kind of shadow people and learn about it, because I don't think everyone does. So do you think that to be successful, you need to have both? Or do you feel that one is valued more than the other? Because I feel like in design, one of those things is valued more than the other. However, I think a combination of both is the most valuable.
In your instance, it'd be the visual side. I said like the sonic side versus the gear side or tech side. Is that what you mean? Like those two separations?
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, you do need somewhat of both to be able to execute fully. But at the end of the day, a lot of the sonic side, or in your case, the visual side, is taste, right? And so how you get there is really like there's 1,000 roads that you could take to get to that taste that you have. And you sort of get to choose that as an artist. So I always liked that kind of thing. Cause look, like for instance, I have a little like stomp box here, and this is intended for like someone that's doing music. They could be playing a guitar and then they're literally stomping on this and it becomes like a kick drum. But I've done a lot with this where I'll like have people sing into it to create like an interesting effect. And that's just like, oh, what are the tools here and how can I use it to kind of make my own taste? And so I think you have to kind of approach it a little bit from both sides, just like not being afraid of the tech and being like, there's no right way as long as I get there to find my taste. Does that answer the question?
The production side is so cool too, because like you can have a song and a melody and an idea. There's just so much you can tinker with and so many ways you can express that idea once you get into the production side of things. And it can really make or break the idea that everything kind of started with. I'm a really big Billie Eilish fan. And I really love to hear like Billie and Phineas, her brother and the producer behind all her music, talk about all the little exciting little intricacies that they put that just like bring the song to life, like the little background things. And like you talking about singing into the, what was it called? Stomp box. Yeah, like my husband and I have been kind of experimenting with little things and finding like little chimes or like things we have around the house, or like it's just such a cool thing to get to experiment with. And visual art is much the same way. You can have like a structure of an idea, a seed of an idea, and then there's lots of different ways that you can get there once you start putting pen to paper or much more digital, like pen to paper versions.
Yeah. I actually think this is a lot of times where artists kind of like hit a place where they're ready to like level up, but they're not sure how. And we see this a lot with people not adding texture. And that's not to say that texture is the end all be all, but we see some designs that feel really flat. And I love flat design. It's actually what I'm typically drawn to, but we'll see a design that is just missing an element. And sometimes it's as simple as adding texture, which might come from someone who's like in production, or we'll see a design that has no context. And it's like, well, if you're producing it, what's the context? Is it a die cut that's really cool? Or is this letterpress printed? Or like what gives it dimension and life? And that translation from screen and digital art to actual out in the wild, tangible, the end goal is oftentimes the product of production and that like taste coming together with the actual design skills. So I thought it was just really interesting to think about that in terms of design. Is like, not everyone has that skill. Not everyone knows how they would actually send something to print. People have the skill of like, yeah, I think this would look cool. Or, you know, I have the foundation of, okay, the hierarchy is there. It looks pretty. The colors are working. But then what do you do to take it to that next level? So I just thought that was really interesting and such a parallel to the visual world. But something else you said was that people do so many different things and you had a lot of different interests. And so it was hard for you to charge for something that was like a hobby or just something you were interested in. I think what that is that when you do so many things, which we've all done, and we're all, if you're creative, you're probably interested in not only music making, but knitting and air dry clay and graphic design and learning on the iPad. And when you do so many things and you try and monetize them, it ends up watering them down. And that's why people are always saying like niche, niche, niche. And we have a lot to say about like, instead of niching down, niche out. So like stay in your lane, but like make your lane bigger basically. And that's why you felt you didn't want to charge, was because it was like something you were doing and people knew you as like the guy who did it for fun. And then you were like, I want to get paid for this now. So can we talk more about that? Like what gave you the confidence? I know you talked a little bit about that, but how would you encourage other people to, if they're like, okay, I just did my first website for myself, now I want to do it for someone else? Where do you like draw the line between doing it for free? How do you get the courage to ask people to pay you? And yeah, let's talk about that kind of gray area.
Yeah. No, I love this because this is like a big thing that I coach people through now in our community, because we get so afraid of, and usually we're afraid of, to me, it's like, what's somebody going to say? What are they going to think about me? How does this make me look? I just want to encourage anybody that's listening that if that's what you're asking yourself, then what if you offering to charge made you look like a professional? What if that meant that they saw you differently? And there's a lot of studies around this, that when we pay more for something, we value it more. And I love this concept because I remember the first time I took a course on my own, I spent like $500 and I thought, oh my gosh, like this is insane. And now it may sound crazy, I don't blink at like a $500 course. It's like, oh, that's normal, you know? Like you just see that, you're like, oh, that means it's at least like something I can justify that like that's going to be valuable. And that's interesting, right? And there was a great study around wine, and they took 2 different bottles of wine and they basically labeled one as premium and one as normal, and said, okay, taste test these. And they told the cost of each bottle, and the one with the highest cost, quote unquote, always got the better reviews. And I'm butchering that, but it's like we psychologically want something to be valuable, and value is created in trusting ourselves enough to make an offer to someone else. And I like the idea of like, we aren't trying to convince anybody of anything, you know? So if you're offering a website, you're not trying to convince them to buy. And the more you're trying to convince them to buy, the less likely they are to buy. So the best thing you can do is say, hey, I got this thing, and here's why it's going to be really valuable for you. Here's why I'm really proud of it. And if you're worried about, and then just see what they say. Okay, cool. That sounds great. How much is it? Well, I charge $1,000 for it. Okay, that feels a little steep. Rather than making that statement, oh, that feels steep, about you, say one of two things. Like, if I do it for less than this, is this still worth it? And I use a 2 of 3 rule here, where it's like, will I make a connection here that's going to benefit me in the future? Will I have a lot of fun doing this? And will I get paid well? So if got to have 2 of those 3 things, right? So if they say, well, this is too steep, well, do I like this person, and am I going to have a blast with this project? And are they likely to connect with me with someone else? Well, maybe not, but maybe I can get them to write me a testimonial since I'm just getting started. So how about this? I'll do it for $700 if you'll write me a testimonial. So now we've just like bridged the gap between what you need and what they need. Okay, that sounds good, right? But I am a little worried, like, what might happen? This is the client. Then you say, well, great. So what would make this a no-brainer for you? Like, what is it that's worrying you? Well, you know, again, this is just a little out of my budget. Okay, well, let's say if I don't deliver what you want, I'm more than happy to give you your money back because I'm confident that I will. Okay, that sounds great. Great, let's move on, right? It's just about a conversation between the two people. And most of us forget that it's a two-way street and that it isn't about convincing. It's about letting someone know that they are being seen and heard in the conversation. And the more we do that, the more people are going to catch on. And the first thing I had happen to me was I was charging too little. And one of my mentors said, 2 things are happening right now. 1, you're hurting the professionals because you're charging too little. And 2, you're hurting yourself because you're a professional and you're charging too little. And those were things that I really needed to hear to kind of get myself to get past that scary thing. And then once I did it 3 or 4 times, I just realized like, oh, someone saying no is part of the deal. It's just like, that's just the way it goes. And it's not as scary anymore to have somebody say no. And I think that the more we can get used to that and understand that, like, mathematically, you're probably going to only I was like, are you at a party right now?
This always happens to her. For those of you who've listened in the past, Ilana just had the balloons pop up around her video for no apparent reason. She was completely quiet. It happens all the time.
It makes me really happy.
I did love it. It felt appropriate. It felt like you were celebrating something I said. So
it's such a mindset thing. And I think the biggest hang up that we see and that we've felt, because we've gone through all this stuff too, and we continue to, is that it feels like selling has to be sleazy. Like you were saying with convincing. To go even further than that, people forget that they're offering something that can genuinely help their audience. And it's like they created this thing because it's genuinely like what people need or what people want, or, you know, something that's valuable. And you just think about like the used cars salesman, and you're thinking about, I'm trying to sell you something that's not good for you. And that's why it feels weird. But you got to remember what you're selling is helping people.
And if you're worried about that, then the likelihood of you making that mistake is really low anyway, because your intention is already good. And the people that are scamming us, they have an intent to scam. So we have to keep that in mind too.
Yep.
On that topic of if you're asking for it and like the free work, something that we do, which I think has been really beneficial for us, is that we do offer things for free, no strings attached. And our philosophy there is that if we can gain your trust by giving you something for free and put enough value in it, imagine how beneficial something that you pay for from us will be. And so a really good example is we have like a 45-minute webinar. And at the end, we say, if you like this, here's a coupon to come into our program. And we didn't invent this. This is like very basic marketing. And it works. And we can see when other people are doing that same idea. And the thing is, you just have to give enough away. There is always more to give away. There is always more. But you have to put a limit on what's going to be in your paid programming or like how much or whatever. And I think some people get really caught up with like, well, if I do one thing for free, then what else will I have left? And like, it's not a supply that's going to run out. You know, it's like,
I also think it doesn't necessarily have to be like a product or a lesson or something that you're giving away for free. A big part of getting that know, like, and trust with your audience is sharing your story and helping them understand who you are. And that's another way to kind of bridge that gap between I'm seeing you for the first time and something that's for sale and I don't know if I should buy it. And knowing that person and trusting that person will help take people to that level where they feel confident in then purchasing from you as well. And I know, Lennon, that's something that you focus on with your cohort as well.
Yeah, the storytelling aspect, like I think I heard maybe Chris Doe or somebody say it this way. I think he pulled it from somewhere else, but it was like a product without a story is a commodity. And I truly believe that, right? Like the things that I'm willing to spend more money on are the things that I feel an attachment to. And that attachment comes from a story. And that story either comes from a story that I'm telling myself or a story that someone has told me. And one of the things that I like to think about is like, if we don't tell the story, they're going to make one up themselves. And that's risky, right? Because that's like, oh, okay, what will they say? And also like that's when you're thinking of it from a sales perspective, like you're trying to make an offer to someone that you know will serve them. They're going to tend to try to justify them either buying or not buying it. And they're going to justify it by going to the place that gives them the story that they want, right? And if you're not offering that story, then they're going to go somewhere else because they're going to make up that like, oh, well, maybe Lennon doesn't have this thing because I've never heard him talk about that. So, but I know that Johnny on the spot over here does. So I'm going to go over here to this guy. Is that a porta potty company? I think it is. So I don't know. It's just an interesting thing where I just think we don't consider the power of that. And we often are to the same point of like selling. We're often like, well, I'm not very interesting. I'm not whatever. And it's like, people aren't looking for interesting. They're looking for relatable. And when we become
authentic,
relatable, and authenticity is really about vulnerability, like just being able to say,
going back to Brene Brown,
that's my
full
girl,
circle,
you know, just being able to say like, okay, I'm going to share something with you, just like you with your music. And I love that you guys like just jump into the podcast. You don't know where it's going to go. Like that's vulnerability, you know? And so just seeing that it doesn't need to be me crying on camera, I think can be healthy for people to understand.
Yeah, stories are so important for artists specifically, like creatives of any type who are selling something like a song or like a piece of art. Like that's why people buy those things, because it makes them feel something, because there's something behind it, because of the creator of that product specifically. So I think that's really an area where we should concentrate when we're thinking about marketing, is instead of looking at it as gross and used car salesman and icky, think about like, how can I just convey who I am and why I do what I do? Because I guarantee that there's a good story behind that.
Yeah. And what I think about this all the time, it's like, if you're a visual artist, let's say, there are people all over the world that are just looking for things that they can have in their space, in their life, that remind them of something that's important to them. Like they want to fill their space with the stories that they tell themselves because it's a reminder of something, as you said, it's an opportunity to connect with something maybe. And that is something I think every artist should remember, is that there are people searching for what you have, but they're not searching for the thing. They're searching for the story that goes with the thing. And then you also have to have a really nice thing. It's like a bit tricky to think about, but I'll use the analogy because then I'll get artists that'll be like, well, but I'll just go and buy things. Like I'll just go to the store and I'll just buy something. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. People do that too, right? So, but if I go on vacation with my wife and we go to Colorado and we're in like a mountain town somewhere and I walk into a store and we see a piece by a local artist, like, beautiful, I want this. This is great. Am I buying that piece? No, I'm buying the piece that represents the experience that I'm having with my wife in this moment. And we forget because there's all these subconscious things that are happening as we buy stuff. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is the context of someone experiencing my thing, and what are they experiencing, and how can I create a better experience for them as they move through my world?
Yeah, put yourself in the shoes of the potential buyer. How do you engage with things? What do you think about what you buy? Why do you make the buying decisions that you do? It's helpful to frame it that way.
I think it's really interesting to talk about this right now, especially in like coming off of the holiday season and the consumerism. And, we've had this trend, I think in both directions, in like getting the dupes,
The
and
dupes?
like the cheap and knockoff, quote unquote, knockoff versions, which like nothing wrong with that. If that's where your budget is, that's great. But then people saying, well, it's exactly the same, so why would I pay for the more expensive thing? And it's like because of the story or because of the thing that it makes you feel. And if the dupe makes you feel that, or it makes you feel like you got a great deal, or it fulfills some sort of emotional need for you or whatever, that's great. And it's okay to say, one day I want to own the real thing, or like I can't do that right now or whatever. But it's, we hear people say like, well, it's so expensive, why would I get that one? And I totally get that argument. I hear that, but it's like if you just went on Amazon and bought a print from what the park you were visiting, it's not the same as picking it out in the store. And every time you see it, remember that trip? That was so great. It's just different. And it's interesting to think about that as we come off of this, consumerism month of spending a lot of money.
It goes right back to your TikTok chair, Ilana, and the story you tell yourself around why you're buying that or not buying it. We tied it all together.
We put a little bow on it. I did.
Some balloons.
Listen.
Yeah.
Listen. I did just get a new rug. There was no rug in here. I got the rug. So now I can match the chair to the rug. I'm going to order it. After this call, I'm ordering it. There's really like no.
I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to text you. And I won't talk to you until you bought the chair.
I think it's just that it hasn't been a priority. Like there's nothing wrong with the chair I'm sitting in, and like I'm not validating.
You say that though, but you've talked about it so much about needing a chair. It seems like it is a priority.
I'm like, it's why? Like, why am I just sitting on this chair? You know what? Now that I think about it, there is no room. There's nowhere to put this kitchen chair. It matches our set, but I do have a high chair in its place. So maybe that's what. I could just go buy it. I don't know. But apparently I have a hang up about it. Sometimes you just got to like crack away, like chisel at that.
Well, it's important to remember that people are complex in this way as well. And when people don't buy a piece of art or don't make a purchase of something that you're offering, it doesn't mean they hate you and they think what you have to offer is invaluable. Sometimes they're just Ilanas and they're really overthinking it.
Right. Well, yes, chronic overthinker, but also I saw this. I've been really interested in this idea of like cost per wear or cost per use and getting like a lot of juice out and like recognizing the value of things. And I think when it comes to some of these bigger purchases, you can do like the 48-hour rule. Obviously, if you're on a vacation and you're like, we need this, great. But like, there's no hard and fast rules. But if you want something, give yourself a good 48 hours and make sure you still want it. I give myself like 48 days, but make sure, because I think about the cost per wear. I think about, we have a small closet situation. I think about like, is this going to be worth the room and the more laundry and the folding and, but it is interesting to think about like, is this going to actually bring me joy? And oftentimes the things that don't come attached to a story aren't. And, even when you're working with someone in the creative space, it's so much more than buying a print. I mean, that's kind of a unique situation. But if you're going to be making music with someone, if you're going to be creating a brand identity, like you want that experience that's going to last several weeks, maybe months, to be something that is enjoyable and is memorable and is like, you really see the value in that. And so if you're not seeing that up front and you're questioning it, like I would advise you to wait. And on the other end is if you're the creative, there's a lot of value in under promising and over delivering. Like not under promising, like, well, I'm just going to give you a logo, but like put in a couple surprises.
Piece of poop. Enjoy.
And then we're going to give you 2 pieces of poop to over deliver.
Okay. There's just something really special.
Is that better or worse?
I don't know. The unexpected, like the client gift at the end, or like, oh, of course I'm going to just change that for you. It's like figuring out where those pieces are where you can surprise and delight, which is a term I learned in my corporate days, and really, really go above. But you need to like make sure that things are going smoothly in order for you to get there. Because if your feet are dragging and you're not enjoying the process, you're not going to want to over deliver to someone. You're going to be like, I actually want to under deliver. I want this over with. And so building those relationships and like having that humanity of like enjoying what you do, but also feeling like you're being valued is that really fine line that I think people struggle with.
What you said too, Lennon, about it not necessarily being about the one-time sales interaction, but about building that relationship. Like one of your questions to yourself was, might this put a bug in their ear and down the line they'll think of me for something else? It's a lot of people that are following us on social media or on our email list or who know us in person, come to our craft fairs and see us all the time. They're not going to make a purchase right away. It's going to be like a long relationship before they find like the piece that is exactly right for them, or they save up enough money. So I think that's another shift that we have to make in our mindset is like, it's not about immediate ROI. This is about crafting relationships with people, like a real authentic relationship.
That's another really good point. And it's just gone. Poof, it's gone. It's going to come back. Can we repeat the three questions that you kind of ask yourself? Those three.
Yeah. So
Can you repeat those?
I look at one, will I get paid well? Right. Number two, will I make a connection that will make more connections down the line? And number three, will I have a lot of fun doing it? So I need two of those three always.
That's great. Those are great checkpoints. I recently had someone ask me, they were in a situation like that where it was a dream client and they were like, I really want to do this because I think it's going to lead to more projects like this in the future, but it was so underpaid and it was a major, major brand. And I think the third one, am I going to have fun? I think they had to kind of convince themselves. They were like, I want this on my resume or on my website or whatever. Like, I want this for my ego bad enough that I'm going to have fun doing it. And that's a hard one because if you are not getting paid fairly and you don't feel valued, then it's really hard to have fun if one of those things is like outweighing the others. So I really like the rule getting 2 out of 3. And then the other thing I was going to say, which that thought that disappeared, it came back, was like when you're at the craft fair, and this might be like an out there story. I don't know. I'm making this up on the spot. But when at the beginning we talked about like watering down what you do. And if someone sees you at a craft fair and is like, oh, I recognize you from online, you do the websites. And then they're like seeing you make jewelry. And then they see you later, like live lettering at an event. And like they're confused potentially as to which things you do because it maybe feels watered down, which like you can do all of those things. That's great. But it's again, that messaging of like where you are in the space and what story it is the story that you try a new thing every week, is the story that you have these 4 different aspects of your business. And it might take time for them to understand that story. And that messaging is really going to be the thing that like helps them to understand, oh, you're the girl who does the 4 different businesses. You know, and 4 is a lot. That's so many businesses. But like Katie said, that print might not resonate with them. But in a year at the next craft show, a different one does or whatever. And so it's that repetitiveness and that consistency and that clear messaging where people can say, oh yeah, you're the person who has these X, Y, and Z. And I think people are really afraid to repeat themselves. I know we were just talking with someone this morning and they were like, you're saying so many things, you need to simplify. And we're like, oh yeah, I could see how that would be confusing. And I think it's okay to repeat yourself and repeat why you love something or what's important to you. Even if you feel like a broken record, like someone's going to resonate with that at some point.
It's
that just stuck with me.
It's an interesting thing, you know, because I call our group like the Overthinkers Anonymous Club. Like we have some of those people where you're just like constantly overthinking, like, what's this going to do to my brand? What's this going to do to whatever? And if you always start, here's how we approach it, is that if you start with a vision and a mission, like what are the things that I want to do to change my little corner of the world? So if, for instance, kind of my spiel is I have a company called Stop the Starving Artist, and we help artists who have made some money in real life take that online and be able to make money building a personal brand, because, you know, I believe that you don't make art, you are the art. And by that, I mean like your experiences, your story, your ideas is where the art comes from. And so the faster somebody connects to that, the quicker that they're going to see your work as valuable. So that's what we focus on. So just in that, if someone saw me talking about personal development or my family or whatever. Like that doesn't take away from this first statement, because I'm saying like, oh, my belief is this: you are the art, you don't make art. That's the thing that's going to stick with somebody. So I love this idea from Patrick Hanlon where he says the strongest communities don't form around a common interest, but a common belief. So if you start with the belief, you can tie everything back to that. And so when we teach personal branding, we always start with that. What is the belief that you're going to wrap everything around? Because likely you have one of those in your life already. You know, for instance, like our family mission, and we didn't solidify this. This wasn't just like, oh, it existed, but it is to help people be the best version of themselves. That's very much in line with like, you are the art, you know, like those two things really interchange well. But that's how we operate as a family. Like, should we go help these people, or should we be a part of this thing? Should we give money to this? Like, well, is it aligned with our mission? Cool. Then yeah, let's do it. And so that kind of clarity really helps you draw those lines back to those stories quicker, so that you have something in place that gives you a target. Because like you said, if you don't have a target and you are just arbitrarily telling random stories, it's not going to make any sense. But if you have a target, people will make the connections way better than you anticipate. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think the story that ties that person that you were kind of outlining, Ilana, who's showing up doing all these different things, but they're showing up at every place in this community. That's kind of their through line. Like they're the person who's has their hand in everything. They're super personable. They're really excited to just experiment with art. And yeah, I think that's a story in and of itself. So there's an underlying value that ties you together, sometimes even when you don't realize it. But the more that you can be aware of it, the stronger your messaging is going to get, because then you can always intentionally point back to that thing.
Yeah. And I'd love to clarify like value, because to me, I always like that term value always frustrated me, because I was like, well, what do you mean value? And there was a great study that Bain and Company did where they put together what they called the value pyramid, which is essentially the business version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But a lot of times value is presented as kind of the base level, which is, how is this going to make you money? How is this going to simplify things for you? Is this going to be affordable? Is this going to be things like that? And so we think of value as that. But what the study shows is that the more of these extra elements on the second and third tier of the pyramid that are offered, in addition to those foundational elements, the more sticky your brand becomes. And those second level elements are like, how are you helping someone curb their anxiety? How are you helping them feel like they're a part of something? How are you helping them feel more comfortable? You know, those kinds of things. And then on the upper level, it's like, are you making them feel like they're a part of a community? Are you helping them feel like they're the better version of themselves? And your product like may not do that specifically, but you as quote unquote, the brand can do that. And so a lot of times what I say is like, you want a more valuable product, like be a more valuable human being. Because when you offer those things and you are helping someone feel like they're a better version of themselves, feel like they're a part of a community, curb their anxiety, be connected, that makes a difference. And when you wrap that around like this thing that you believe in and that you're helping people fight for, it's a pretty powerful thing. And it feels like you're allowed to spread your message out and talk about more stuff, you know, because it's all wrapped around this umbrella, or put under an umbrella, not wrapped around it.
That made me think of like a literal example of someone who creates products that help alleviate people's anxiety, who's an artist. Ilana, don't you have some tie to that person who's on Shark Tank, or like, you know, somebody who knew her? You know who I'm talking about? Who does the shirts that have like messages written like on the sleeve, or like,
You Are Not Alone, I think, but I don't know her. I know someone else who was on Shark Tank, but not her.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, there's an artist who makes these like apparel pieces. Clearly, I'm not in this industry. And yeah, she'll write things like on the end of the sleeve that's like a message that you can look down and you can remind yourself of something to ease your anxiety, or just be like, oh, I'm not alone today, or it's okay if I'm feeling stressed. This is a natural feeling. And some of them are like wearing loud and proud, like I'm an overthinker, you know, like maybe it's a signal to other people. This is the type of person I am. Maybe I don't want to be approached by you, weird man on the subway. things like that. So I just wanted to give a specific, like, literal example of how I've seen somebody do something with that mission at the base. But like you said, Lennon, it definitely doesn't have to be literal. And I think that's where a lot of people get held up too. They're like, okay, I feel like I'm supposed to change the world with my product, and it's a greeting card. I don't know how to do that. I feel this disconnect. I don't think greeting cards can like fully change the world. But yeah, I mean,
Well,
there's
your
much
corner of it,
small,
right? Like,
yeah,
that's what
there's
I always
much
like. How did you,
smaller
what is the
ways.
proximity? Yeah.
Right.
I was wrong. It is called See the Way I See, just so everyone knows. Correct
Thank you.
myself. Yeah.
I'm going to look that up.
We'll
That's
link
cool.
it in the show notes as well, but it's amazing. And her Shark Tank story, I believe that she basically got on and they were like, you do not need a deal from us, ma'am. You're doing just fine. So that is an amazing story in the art business world. But yeah, her messaging is very clear, and it's, you know, you feel like you're a part of this movement to destigmatize and to just, it's great. One of her sweatshirts says, not an asshole, just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. Oh, I need it. It's so good. That's
yeah,
good.
it definitely, and what was the name again? I make you something about feeling seen. See the way I see.
the way
Yeah.
I see. And we'll link
And
to it.
that's what it does for the community. You feel like you're in a community of people where you can feel seen and understood, because there's not a lot of clothing out there that's specifically for that kind of person, that kind of vibe. So yeah, sadly we have to start wrapping things up, but I would love, Lennon, if you could share where the people can find you, what you're up to, give a shout out to whatever you're working on and where people can get in touch.
Yeah. So stopthestarvingartist.com is an easy place to find me. I do workshops every couple weeks or so where we talk about kind of the 7 steps for you to profit more from your art by building your personal brand. And it's absolutely free. So you can come hang out for one of those. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and kicking up the YouTubes this year. Just trying to slowly build things up. We're starting our 3rd year total in business. And so of like being full-time in it since I left my other job. And so it's a super exciting time. And I just want to acknowledge both of you for like being such approachable people in a space that like needs more of that. I love you guys' approach. I love like what you're doing. And I just am so honored and grateful to be here and just like talking about poop, porta potties, and like balloons and TikTok shares.
I don't know
y'all.
how
So
every episode.
It's me. It's my fault.
It's me. Hi.
Hi. And now my cat wants to.
All right.
say
Well,
hello.
thank you. Oh my God. Thank you so much for coming on. It was great to talk to you, and we'll definitely see you on the interwebs. And we appreciate all the wonderful advice. I love those 3 questions. I'm going to write them down and make sure I do a gut check with myself next time.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All good things.